2013 and a brand new champion, a show that combined the mind of Einstein with the heart of a poet. It's the Purple Pants Band, E equals MC squared. We've gathered some of the design staff and members of the 2013 Carolina Crown. Let's run it back. Joining us in our little Zoom meeting room is 2013 Carolina Crown Corps Director, still Corps Director, Jim Coates. Hi, Jim.
How you doing, Dan?
Keith Potter was on the design team in 2013. Hi, Keith, the better-looking Potter.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Drill writer Leon May is with us. Hi, Leon.
Hi, how you doing?
The guy you see in all those Drop the Hammer videos, the man at the top of Crown Brass, Matt Harloff, is here. Hi, Matt.
Dan, everybody. Great to see you all.
2013 Carolina Crown second drum major, Hunter Bound.
Hey.
Hunter, don't call me Brown. Bound, I guess I know. Michael Rosales on the color guard staff. And Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did a lot of the body work, a lot of the choreo for the Corps that year, right?
A little bit of both, yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi, good to see you. Percussion guru and Hall of Fame member Thomas Hannum is here. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Dan. How are you? How's everybody doing out there? Thanks for doing this.
Brass arranger is here.
Hey, Dan, how's it going? Good to see everybody's faces.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to see Michael Townsend's COVID hair. That's very nice. Michael Townsend, of course, color guard and visual staff, 2013 Carolina Crown. And to my, I guess on my screen here, I've gone around the circle, didn't deliberately save her for last, but why not? Drum major on the podium in 2013, Linda Harvey. Hi, Linda.
Hey, Dan. Great to see everybody here. It's very, very refreshing and hearing your voice, Dan.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's great to see everybody here. I just, right before we did this, I went and sat and watched the show. Oh gosh, it's, you know, I've seen it dozens and dozens and dozens of times, but I sat and watched it 2 times back to back. What an amazing production this was, y'all. And I guess, Jim, let's just start with you. Did you have a sense at any point in the season, June, July, that this was a little something different and this one could go farther?
Yes, absolutely. Numerous times throughout the year. The first time that it really hit me was, I think, Keith, you'll remember this. We got rained out of our dress rehearsal in spring training. And we never got a chance to do that before we left. Then we traveled on our way out to California and stopped in Arkansas. And we had the War Memorial Stadium to rehearse at that day and that night in the weekend. And on Saturday night, I believe it was, or it could have been Sunday, I forget which night it was, but we had a dress rehearsal where they came in the stadium and they set up the first thing. And I get it right now as I sit here and think about it. I looked at Keith and just was like in awe of what we had out there. That was the first time that we'd seen the whole Corps in the purple pants. and what an amazing feeling that I had at that moment. I remember just turning to Keith and going, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And that was the first time. And then numerous times throughout, but it's a memory that sticks with me.
Keith, do you remember that moment?
I do, but you know, not only the costume, seeing that the first time was awesome in that kind of rehearsal on a Saturday night under the lights, but also standing with Michael Klesch and hearing the ballad. We were playing with the ballad and how the poem would fit in, and the exact getting the right voice and getting the right rhythm and getting it to sync with where it was with the music. And that night it happened the first time where it was like, that's awesome. You know, that like we looked at each other and we're like, I mean, I think I had tears in my eyes. It was, you know, it was a really special moment, all of it coming together. You know, how drum corps is, it's like you work all winter and you're throwing darts and you think you're making great decisions and you're hoping you're making great decisions. And when it starts to come together like that and some of those key moments, there were some other things that weekend that we kind of put our first ending on, and trying to figure out how that was going to work, and that came together. So it was, as Jim said, it was a really memorable time with the core that season.
Well, let's back up and look at the steps that led to that moment with you and Jim realizing this was something special, and that's the design of this show. And I guess if I imagine what that design meeting was like, somebody brought Philip Glass's Einstein on the Beach and said, "Hey, listen to this," and was the whole show kind of based off that piece of music, or was there something more there that I'm missing?
It's I'm sure everybody has a little bit different perspective on how it came together, but as we typically do, the design process kind of worked in stages. And the very first weekend that we met, it was kind of a where have we been and what do we want to do next? And so I remember talking with Jim saying to us, I want to try to do something accessible but avant-garde. And I remember sitting in the meeting thinking, like, the juxtaposition of those two words coming together and being a little bit personally kind of conflicted with it. But then it started to kind of it started to become a fun challenge, because those two kind of things can be very different. So trying to do something that the audience could relate to and to have access to, and something that was a little bit I guess maybe a little bit refreshing in terms of bringing the Philip Glass, that Einstein on the Beach to the drum corps, because we did listen to a lot of different music in that meeting. And when we did our recap before we went to dinner, it was like, well, what did we hear that we liked? And I remember Ian Hale was in the room with us, and he said, of all the things we listened to, I really like the Einstein on the Beach. And so we were all kind of like, yeah, we kind of have that same. So that kind of started the ball rolling of this accessibility avant-garde combo. But then from there, we all go away and we start to think about, well, how does this actually turn into a show, and what is it? And I remember starting to, and I don't know what drove me this way, but starting to think about kind of this, the intellectuals or philosophers. And I was reading about Nietzsche and about the Superman, and that led me to the Strauss piece. And somehow
also
Sprach. Yeah, also Sprach. So then we had the Philip Glass, and we had that, and it was like, where's this kind of going? And kind of shift away from philosophers and into academics and science, math, physics, and kind of started to shift to Einstein. And I remember being at BOA and sitting at the table at dinner with everybody, and kind of having this, like, what if we called the show equals MC squared? We're just going to use an equation. Not going to be a story, but there's going to be, we'll base it on energy and relativity and time travel and infinity, and the idea of, and of course then the love part came into it, and how that emotion tied into the infinite, love forever, or nothing has an ending, or everything has an ending except my love for you. That became part of that. So I'm kind of babbling here, but it kind of all spun out of control, and in a good way for us. And we were able to just keep contributing to it.
Michael Klesch, what do you remember about the design process for the show?
Oh God, not too much different than what Keith's talking about. It's always an ebb and flow of things. And for me, it's a lot about looking for the right music. We knew we liked the Einstein on the Beach. Like the most torturous part of it was probably, like any show, it's the ballad, what we're going to do for the ballad. And I know that we had a piece that we even read at a camp. It was okay, not really crazy about. And then when we started talking about combining that with some of the lyrics from Einstein on the Beach, I was always a fan of the Abyss soundtrack that Alan Silvestri had done. And there's a piece in there called Butt on the Ledge. It's also used at different times in the movie, but it has this ethereal and then ascending and then very triumphant kind of moment to it. So we started playing around with that. I know I sent it to Keith one time. I was like, what do you think of something like this? It's a completely different than the piece we were playing. And then there was a day that I was sitting at home, like with a MIDI playback from Finale, and recording myself trying to come up with different ways to put the poem over top of it. So much fun. But then when you see it, like Keith said, all come to that moment where you get to hear it with real live people, playing real instruments and real human beings talking and singing. It's like, that was probably one of my favorite memories of the whole thing. But musically, there was just a lot of fun music to start to work with in there.
Jim Coates, Keith Potter says you wanted a show that was accessible but avant-garde. It seems to me that your thoughts in that regard extended beyond that one season. That were you trying to establish that as a programmatic identity of Carolina Crown, that this is a core that's accessible?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we spent a lot of years, Dan, when I first came. Michael and Leon were there the very first year when we got this team started to get together in 2003, and Matt was there also. And my whole thing was just about being accessible, recognizable. I just thought Crown or DCI needed that kind of a feel going on. And of course, we couldn't have done the avant-garde stuff, I don't think, early, because we didn't have the talent of the membership to be able to do those kind of things. And as we progressed to that point, now we were 10 years in from our first time when the four of us were together, and Keith joined a little earlier. Even back then, Keith came up with the name the very first time we were together. Bellissimo, Keith, if you remember that, you came up. And Michael Townsend was there too from the very beginning. They mean to leave out that. But so at that stage, I was like anybody else. I was like, we're just going to keep on having fun, keep on enjoying, but how can we push the envelope a little bit? And my thing was, at that point, 2013, and even before then, I looked at my role as to challenge the staff to just go for whatever you feel you can, and assess the talent that we have. And these people do it so wonderful. Watching them access the talent as it came with us, and of course write for that in every level possible. So yeah, I did think we wanted to keep on doing and heading in that direction. Well, that was certainly the year that made it possible to head in that direction even more. So.
Well, we've heard from brass and visual and the core director. Let's talk a little bit about the design of the percussion program. Tom Hannum, what do you remember about putting together this show, the bones of this show?
Well, I think probably one of the big attractions was the percussion feature was from Knee 3, which was from the Einstein on the Beach, and it was very rooted in vocals and speaking numbers and and that whole thing. It was fascinating, and so that was kind of cool, and I really liked the idea of us highlighting the vocalists and utilizing them as like a main instrument in this feature. I remember Mr. Klesch, you'll remember when Andrew Markworth came up for 2 to 3 days in either the end of January, beginning of February or something. And he came up into Hadley with us. I mean, Michael and I live a mile, not even a mile from each other. And so Andrew spent like 2.5 days here, and we went through, and I mean, we really weeded out everything and detailed, revised the counting structures and the whole thing, because there's a lot of great initial ideas, but it really needed to be, the mechanics of it needed to be kind of sorted through. And we did that early on, which I think really served us well, because the foundation was well thought through. And so that was really pretty cool.
We're gonna dig way into that percussion feature in just a moment, but I appreciate the background on it. Let's turn to the two Michaels. The potential, Michael Townsend and Michael Rosales, visually and from a color guard perspective. You guys had to be looking at this show kind of salivating, I would bet.
Yeah, well, I was pretty new to the team. So I remember walking to the team and looking at all the talent that was there from a design perspective, and the kids were just remarkable. And so I just listened a lot. What do you need? Leon, what do you need? Keith, what do you see here? Michael, like, I remember just being so open-eyed and just being amazed by all the talent around.
Well, Michael Townsend, you had.
Oh yeah, I concur with Michael. First of all, I mean, he was a huge breath of fresh air for the drum corps that year. I mean, when the people you work with, they inspire you in different ways. And for Crown, I think that show was bookended by shows that were, pretty specific in terms of the storyboard, and this moment is about this, and we have to get this idea across. And when you're telling a story, it becomes very literal in terms of trying to get that stuff across. And this was such a breath of fresh air because there was no specific, it had to be this roadmap. It was wide open. Like we could be creative. Once this thing hit the road, it was just so fun to produce and create. I mean, one of my favorite things I think was talking to Matt Harloff one day, because I had this thought of putting the tubas in the rifle, or the rifle in the tubas at the beginning of the show. We were spread like end zone to end zone. There was one rifle for every tuba, and it just turned into this cool thing where it was like, well, Matt, can we play that tone with it not sounding weird with a rifle in it? And I remember experimenting with it, and it was just really fun things that you don't normally do in drum corps. I mean, we were teaching the kids how to count choreography. Normally the guard would be, oh, it's an 8-cent phrase. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This is count 5, 6, 7, 8. But when the music's 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, it gets confusing that count 2 is on a what you're hearing is a 4. So those moments in our show, and there was a lot of them, we had to actually teach the kids the physical music and use those as checkpoint markers so they could really become one with it. I mean, it was a very different process in terms of the creation of the show, and I think it was a really different show inside our sort of bookending of what we had done before and after. So, I mean, it was super fun. We were in California. I just remember riding in the RV with Jim and blowing tires and throwing trailers, and Jim fixing things and making a carburetor out of some bamboo we found on the side of the road. It was one of the most fun summers ever. I mean, going out to California and doing the stuff we did. So, and there's just too many fond memories to even go through on the call.
Linda Harvey and Hunter Bound, when the staff brought this show to the membership, do you remember the reaction, Linda?
At first, everybody was a little skeptical, but at least from what I remember, we were just like, okay, cool. And I think, like everybody's kind of talked about, once we started to see how many levels were in the show, like from, straightforward ideas to so many different things that everybody could appreciate, I think we started to see how exciting and what just a perfect storm it was, like especially once we got out to California and got to start seeing people's reactions, not only to the fact that Crown hadn't been out to the West Coast in a while, but I think just seeing how much people got to appreciate the product that we were getting to put on, that was whenever I think everybody really started to buy in and see there's some really cool potential here with everything that we've got going, and so much more that we can keep adding.
Hunter, do you remember that excitement?
Oh, I mean, I definitely remember excitement. I do remember a bit of pushback on the purple pants, which now seems crazy. Like living in 2020, you're like, wait, people cared about the purple pants at some point? It seems so ridiculous, but I think one of my favorite things is just that Crown it's a group that people love, and they always have. And so to get to do something a bit more avant-garde, it felt like, it's like, I would describe the experience as like feeling like the people's drum corps. We just felt like the drum corps that everyone was rooting for. It was a great time.
Well, and Hunter, you had a role beyond conducting. You were in the quartet that did the numbers during the percussion feature. When did you find out that you were going to be behind a mic and counting really, really fast and oddly?
I mean, we did like vocal auditions back in audition camps in January and February and everything, and we had some part of music for it. I mean, we called ourselves the 1, 2, 3, 4s, of course. I still have a T-shirt with a sailboat on it somewhere in my closet. Yeah, I guess it was, I don't know, it must have been early in spring training, though. Or not spring training, but in the winter camps,
Well, let's get into the show. Let's start with the Strauss, also Sprach Zarathustra. And the dialogue is that dialogue that we hear at the beginning, is all of that from Einstein on the Beach?
Yeah, it is. All the stuff that Becky and Rebecca said at the beginning was from Einstein on the Beach. And really, that was one of the coolest things, was getting to move in and, explaining to those girls what their role was. I think that, I probably got with Michael at some point in the winter and Matt of like, okay, well, we need to take 2 horn players out of the beginning of the show to be these 2 girls that are going to talk. And so, through, I think, Michael, you could probably speak to that. Was there some sort of audition process for those 2? I can't even remember.
We did audition, but it just, I think things work out in special ways at special times. And it just happened that we had Rebecca Easley. She was a vocal major in addition to, being a mellophone player. Hunter had vocal training. Kevin was talented about everything. And Becky Foltz did also, so it just happened that way. But we did have, that winter and the following winter, we had like vocal auditions. And we'd have auditions for like, what would Matt call them? Like, what you got? Just come in and show us whatever tricks and other things that you have outside of the normal drum corps skills. So yeah, but it was, it was kind of a no-brainer to use those 2. And my favorite line was Rebecca Easley, a sailboat. And I was like, I would lose it every time she would say that.
And the imagery I get in hearing that is I'm seeing literally Einstein sitting there on the beach staring at his knees and his mind racing with numbers. Is that what is going on at that moment? Or
if you saw it that way, I think that's brilliant.
There we go. I can't go past this point without giving kudos to DCI Hall of Fame announcer Brant Crocker, because he and I, through the course of the season, Jim Coates would cue us when to start the announcement. And there is a very obvious, what we call in the business, post, and it's the big hit, and also Sprach Zarathustra. And we both had limited success, shall we say, through the course of the season in hitting that post. And Brant absolutely nailed it on finals night.
Performing their 2013 program, E equals MC squared. Drum Corps International is proud to present Carolina Crowd.
You got it just right. Jim, am I remembering that season and that correctly, getting that cue right?
Yeah, Dan, it was. And if you remember, on the way out to California, we stopped somewhere, I forget where, Arkansas, it could have been, or something. Or didn't you show up for rehearsal, or we were, it could have been the next year.
That was Oklahoma. That was in Oklahoma.
It was Oklahoma. And I had mentioned, and you were like, well, I said, well, you guys have got to have a part in this because we're going to try to time this out right. I don't know, Keith, if we ever talked about putting it on, recording it and getting them to do it. I don't know if it was that year or other years, but I think we did. But you happened to be there that show. And I'm curious to hear your first initial reaction when from that night even. And we were still rough on the way out there, very rough. But we were certainly prepared, to say the least.
Yes,
so,
you were. And the crowds in California got how prepared you were, that's for sure. You had a standing ovation at the end of the opener on finals night. I mean, the crowd bought in immediately. And when that last hit came at the end of the opener, they popped up, didn't they? Yeah.
Something about the standing O's in this show was unreal, really. I remember the night that we were at Ruth Chris, we were doing a dinner there. I think it could have been Thursday night or Friday night it was. And I happened to go to the men's room, and there was Gregory Pitch was sitting at another table, and he called me over and he whispered me in here. He goes, "You had 8 standing O's last night, and you got this. You just go for it, And I didn't even recognize it was that many, but I recognized that the crowd was really willing us all the way through that last week to take care of our business, and that was lighting the crowd up.
Tom,
they were fun.
One of the other notable things about that opener is the timpani that are spread out all over the field. Where and when did that idea come about?
Well, I think it's funny because it probably really was born from what we did the previous year when we did all the Copeland stuff, and we had timpani in both end zones and in the very back of the field on the 50. At times playing at the same time. I mean, talk about insane, but we took that idea of having the timpani on the field and the sonic, kind of the sound that produced, and then we took and moved them up front on the front sideline and kind of incorporate, because we wanted to keep that idea going, I guess. And what a perfect piece. The piece just absolutely lent itself very naturally to it, and so we kind of built off of what happened that previous year, and as I think a lot of times successful programs tend to do. So
the second piece, energy, Paul Lavac Cooper, Matt Harloff. This was the brass compulsories here, man. This was a technical showcase, and most of it while moving. I mean, there are very few times in that production piece where you're standing still and the horn line is cranking it out.
Yeah, the brass line was very, very talented, and as it's kind of already been mentioned, it is kind of it's a culmination of what happened in years prior. Ultimately, I hope that everybody that's been all of the alumni that have been a part of Crown feels some sort of ownership on and what happened in 2013, and I hope they do. I do believe that it was a historical year for Crown. It was their first championship, so I certainly hope the people of the 90s and all that. I hope, and I know they do. They feel that they're a part of it, as they should. But in particular, the last 2 years prior to 2013, when we talk about the brass, the 2 years before we did that whole guitar feature, and so the multiple tonguing that we did that year, that just went on to the next year, and I know we'll get into the closer, but that all stuff, we're moving too. I mean, you're not standing there anymore, you're moving. So yeah, and it's incredible. But getting back to the opener, the 2 years before that helped get to where the opener was, and Michael does such an incredible job of, when he writes that stuff, he knows what he's writing, and he knows how to make it achievable, and all that was very, very achievable. And in the end, it was all about getting the whole ensemble, the brass and the pit, all that together when it came to the end, the finals performances and all that. But yeah, that beginning, all that stuff, and love that. It's one of my favorite parts of the show is that beginning. So,
Michael Klesch, did you ever think this is just too many notes? I've written, no, this is just too much. I got to water it down just a little bit. Did you ever feel like you were pushing him too hard?
No, I mean, like, at some point you get to that a little bit, but like with Crown, again, we were there so long. You think back to 2003, there were like woodwind players trying out to be in the horn line. So they, those guys really built what that brass section was, to the point where you try to write stuff they can't play. It goes to the other side. It's like, okay, how far can we push it? Like to that other side. You're not being careful anymore. You're trying to see what the other boundary is. So no, it's, and a lot of that, again, Paul Lavac Cooper, you take that inspiration from these great brass band pieces that these guys write, which, from my understanding of a lot of it is they try to outdo each other. You get to these contests and it's just fireworks of brass playing. So perfect stuff for somebody like Crown to do.
That's Paul Lavac Cooper's background is the British brass band.
I know that he writes other things, but the stuff that we've used of his came from the brass band literature.
Gotcha. And Michael Townsend, the guard is showcased there too, and is just as technical as the brass line.
Yeah, it's funny because being a Crown, and when that brass line started to be able to do these things that no one else could do, it kind of demanded that the Guard interpret those things, you know. So it would be like, oh my God, here's another thing where we have to do something that really picks up the fact that their tongue's hitting the mouthpiece 7,000 times in a second. And there's only so many different ways you can do that, and so many times you can do that. And it felt like it's a constant challenge to represent what the horn line was able to do and able to present out there. When they're loud, we have to be loud. You know, when they're beautiful, we have to be beautiful. And those things you can easily take for granted. And at the same point in time, it's a huge weight on your shoulders to kind of make sure that it's represented the right way. And I think that really was a huge driver of the virtuosity during especially those years where the Corps was able to play like that. It just drove us to try and increase the virtuosity with what we do to represent it. So it raised the bar a lot in terms of what we were able to do and what we were doing.
And Leon, you decided they were going to move, but you still had to be careful the way you moved them while they were playing those technical passages.
Well, yeah, I tried to be smart, but I also tried to, push it as far as we could possibly go. I can remember about putting that opener together, that piece of music. The drill, every part that if there was a baritone feature followed by a mellophone feature, what we were trying to do visually and integrate with the color guard. And I remember things just kept going our way. There's certainly times in my life when I write songs and things are just like, oh, I got 2 sections forward. Now I got to go back, and now I got to go forward and work backwards. Everything really fell into place for that tune. Just the way, the amount of time that we spent doing, the amount of time we spent as an ensemble playing, how the drum line was going to work and all that. I just remember like everything came together so nicely writing that tune.
I would just say also that like, well, Matt was talking about, like the pit and trying to get the pit to, I guess, integrate in with the brass. I would say the same is true for the battery, and to write and have those guys play in a way where it complements, but it doesn't step on. When it's all very intricate and dense rhythmic structures and the orchestration's going on, that's pretty cool. I mean, I think sometimes it's easy to overlook what they're achieving because it's the brilliance of the brass thing is so stunning that other facet of it it's just kind of easy to look and listen past it, so.
And the one thing we have to keep in mind here, that was what we called pre-show back then. That wasn't even part of the judge portion of the show. That was like, we're just setting the tone. And that was a pretty...
I've been referring to it as the production piece. It was, and Matt corrected. He said, no, this was the opener. You're right.
Well, yeah. I think the show started, where the announcement was right before the big impact, right, in Strauss.
Right.
So it was a little bit of Strauss was kind of like an intro to the energy piece kind of became the opener. And I feel like we even made some cuts to that. I remember doing some stuff that we had to pull out when we were in Arkansas.
I have to look
a little bit of surgery there.
When Tony DiCarlo goes from this to this, then we would know.
Right.
Yeah.
Leon, you had a thought. Let's get back to you. Do you remember?
Well, of course, the part came into my head of like the really impossible part of the song to write was when we had the Doppler effect about 2/3 of the way through the song, and we got the entire horn line to 2 huge diagonals with the drum line kind of coming through behind them. And it also during this is when we sent the flag line to the backside line to do a color wave thing to pick up the Doppler. So, putting all of those elements into place. I mean, when I think back of how smoothly we had to work everything to get to that moment, to have this one payoff, and then to still be able to, have a nice big climactic ending. It was quite a project, but again, even though it was difficult, everything fell into place really nice.
So the next thing then is Bern, 1905. I think the piece is called Obsession. Is that the name of the percussion feature, Tom?
I said that. Yeah, that's what I saw on the score today. Obsession. So.
Okay. So just so we're all on the same page. This
Right.
is the one that had the numbers quartet. Hunter Bound, you were part of that. Kevin LaBouffe, a baritone player, was part of that. Becky Foltz, now Becky Everett. We've already talked about her. And Rebecca, then Easley, now Rebecca Lowry, were all part of that numbers quartet. And you talk about the tonguing and the brass line in the previous piece. It seems, Hunter, like your tongues were moving as fast as humanly possible as you were doing those numbers. How much rehearsal did it take before you felt like, yeah, I got this?
We spent a lot of time on that. I think that if I were to like, when I try to remember that summer and I try to like access a memory, I'm like, okay, 30% chance it's going to be in a Perth Ensemble rehearsal working on that feature. You know, I don't know that we actually said 1, 2, 3, and 4. It was kind of more like a 1, 2, 3, 4. Like it all just kind of went together. But so much of it was, we were really like a front ensemble member. You know, our responsibility was to agree with what was going on behind us with the battery, you know. So their parts were written outlining what we were doing, and we were kind of like the solo voice on top of that. So we were really just another percussionist.
And I bet there's a bond between the four of you from doing that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I get to see Rebecca up at BOA still. And, you know, I mean, we just were around each other all the time. I remember this one specific rehearsal. Tom, you probably remember this. We were in California, and it was the time when the swarm of bees just appeared in the middle of a Perth Ensemble rehearsal. It's the weirdest thing I've experienced in my whole life. Like, I saw Matt Harnoy just like running to a bathroom. All of a sudden, Rebecca is next to me crying under a vibraphone. It was wild, but we were saying some numbers and then bees and then more numbers.
All right. Tom Hannum, how did they do blending with your battery and with the front ensemble? Pretty good job, I think.
Oh, they were fantastic. I mean, we were, as you can imagine, we were blessed to have people that strong and that skilled to be able to do this. But, you know, it just seemed like at Crown, the training allows for you to take those chances, you know, and this was a very, very good example of it. And, you know, and they were with us every step of the way. So in that regard, there really was no disconnect. They were absolutely, as Hunter pointed out, they were part of the front ensemble voice, no pun intended, and they did figure out how to listen back and fit in with the battery and do all the things that the pit people do. So it was really cool.
And thank goodness we had Hunter, who was largely responsible for a lot of the Met programming, for all of those time signature changes. I don't know if he wouldn't have been the brain behind that, that would have made things much more of a struggle. So he was a huge part of making that much less stressful than what it could have been.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's funny. In listening to today, I did take a few notes about, you know, the metric modulations and all the meter changes and so forth. And, you know, the way the drum corps rehearse with metronomes, that was not an easy thing to get under control and to learn how to manage. So kudos to you, Hunter. There you go.
Well, thank you. I just remember guard members walking around. They're like, it's not 1, 2, 3, 1. It's 1, 2, 3, 1. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. It's very funny.
The other thing I wrote on my notes was, not in this piece, but throughout the show and with Crown, man, we did an awful lot of like retards, like an awful lot of retards to create dramatic effect. And Michael, we've talked about this often, just how it was almost taken for granted that we would be doing these things. And man, we had to rehearse those a lot. They are not very easy to do. And for some reason, it kind of got like overlooked, I think, because we did a lot of it and it just became part of the palette of what people were hearing. But the dramatic effect of it was awesome. And I think that's got something to do with the crowd's reaction, you know, honestly, is how we did some of those stretching of time and whatnot. So pretty cool stuff.
Linda Harvey, talk about conducting that.
Oh, which part? The retards or the time signatures or the tempos?
All of it.
Yes.
You know, I'm so grateful how much time I got to spend around all of the percussion and specifically around Tom, like as he explained to me more of how all of those things were written. I mean, as far as all the time signature changes, I just had to get a lot better at reading music from the battery and like understanding how that related to what I was hearing. And once I just heard it enough, it clicked, and it was a lot easier from that point. I mean, as far as like all the retards, like it's not easy, especially then some of these things where you're including the timpani and all of these instruments that are spread from end zone to end zone. But it took a lot of work to figure that out. And I remember, rehearsals where Michael Clash is standing on the podium with me of like, telling me like count out loud to like better pace the slowing down. And it was challenging, but like once things started to click and we started to get more consistent with those things, I mean, that's some of my most fond memories looking back, is like those moments where we didn't have the metronome and it was very much more emotional in some of those moments and getting to kind of breathe a little bit. But I mean, those are the moments that were the most challenging, but at least now, like I look back as my most fond, and that definitely, I mean, made me grow greatly as a conductor and just feeling comfortable and like trying new things and, just do something different sometimes. But it was a huge challenge, but so much fun. I think for everybody, not just Hunter and myself getting to conduct that, but it was just some incredibly cool moments that we're very lucky that we got to share with so many people.
And she was really good, Dan. I mean, like you see some people progress over their time as a drum major who have the ability to be in there for 2 years or maybe 3 or something like that. And there's not a lot of people that get to experience that. So you think about a finals night, there's really 12 kids that get to be in responsible, charge of that. And there's either the drum corps drags you down like the Titanic, or you control the drum corps. And Linda was one of those people that grew into she controlled the drum corps. The drum corps did not control her. And that's hard. That's hard, and it's really special. And the musicality that she's talking about, like we did a lot of trial and error with that to get to the point where it was consistent, so that the guard could rely on it being the same way every night, and the musicians could rely on it being the same way. It's hard, it's not the mathematical equation to musical approach, adding an eighth note, adding 2 eighth notes, add 3 eighth notes, but keep them all in time so that it sounds like a retard. It was real musical expression. And man, she and Hunter both, they came to the fore when it was time to do that stuff. Really, it's special to have people that can do that.
Well, and the visual program was equally musical. Michael Townsend, Michael Rosales. Tell us a little bit about the choreography for that piece.
There was definitely fluctuation. That's what I would say. I mean, it was like Murphy's Law, whenever there would be a moment where there's this big apex of the show and we would really milk it and juice it. Well, it would never sound like that on the MIDI. When we would get to spring training and we'd have to write the piece. And then, Murphy's Law has everyone in the guard doing a big unison statement in those moments. And those are the hardest, most challenging moments for a unison color guard statement, to not really have predictable time. So, I mean, that's always an adventure. And I can certainly tell you, Michael, myself, Tom Hannum, we've always had those discussions about, all right, how are we getting around this? How can we metronate this out so it boop, boop, boop? I want 29 counts or whatever it's going to be. And it always worked out. It really did. But I have to say, I was crossing my fingers at a lot of early shows until we got that stuff to the point where it felt natural. It was all worth it.
I can remember, dude, you come into my room at Move-In and asking me to shout into a microphone all the counting of all the middle of knee 3. I mean, it was so hard.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a funny tape of me with my voice cracking somewhere of me counting knee 3 for you.
Yes, for sure. The guard would listen to that and rehearse to it.
Yeah.
Michael Rosales, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even try to count. I would literally, I would create a phrase, they would play the music, I would just create the movement, and someone figure out when I did that arm and when I did that jump. It was a lot. It was definitely a lot. And on top of that, and within all this really intricate, really hard stuff that's happening, I think the other challenge was how do we keep pulling performance out of this? You know, how do they stay human? I know they're playing these fast notes and they're doing all these crazy hand stuff with the color guard. Like, we got to stay human. And so, you know, like the journey was definitely there, I think, for the whole core.
Oh, one of the coolest things for me is in the quartet, Rebecca and Becky are doing this kind of thing with their hands that's spacey and odd, but somehow totally fits with what's going on. Hunter,
Hunter, can you, when did you do that? Because I can remember showing up at a rehearsal one day. I'm like, what's going on?
Dudu added it the last week. It was the last week. That was all. Like, I remember Dudu just pulling us aside and we're like, okay, we're doing something.
Didn't that come from the original Einstein on the Beach stuff that we saw or something?
Oh, yeah. Well, because we did a lot of like.
The writing. Yeah.
Writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was my 2 counts of choreography I put in the show, was just pretend you're like a crazy professor writing on the chalkboard. And
choreography by Leon May.
Yeah.
We also wrote on the drum heads that year. That was one of the big things that was like constantly in a state of experimentation with Keith's idea paint.
Having all of the chalkboard equations on the drum heads.
Yeah.
But there was a time you're talking about where we took a white dry erase or a wet erase mark, right?
Yeah, on the blackhead.
On the blackheads, yeah. I think eventually we just printed or went away from that because it wasn't working out every time. Maybe. Did we try
I feel like we did end up doing it on the solo drum that we jumped around on. I feel like we did end up doing it, just not in as big of a scale as we had talked about in production planning.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Jim Coates, and it looks like he's reliving all of this and the decisions and the different props and the changes. What are you thinking about, Jim?
Yeah, I was saying that if I could be a fly on the wall again, like I was at different times, I would visit. They'd be in their dorms and having their conversations and doing this or doing that, and I'd just stop in and say, "How's it going, guys?" And they then continue on, and I'd be sitting there just saying, "Wow, what creative people I have sitting around me! How lucky I am!" And I felt that way through all of that, through all of the years, of just how lucky we are as an organization to have the people to come together that are as creative as this group and other groups too. But at those times, this is when we were starting to fire on all cylinders. I think we did the year before too, in 2012, and then also 2009 is when we really started just hitting our stride. So it took years even after the first time that we really kind of did that. But those times and listening to these stories is, and then is how I feel. What's next? What are they going to remind me of next? And it's an honor. It's a pleasure to have those.
I'm going to guess that there are some memories tied to the ballad, and that's where we're going next. First of all, the dialogue. Kevin LeBeouf kills it as the narrator.
The day with its cares and perplexities is ended, and the night is now upon us. We have need of a soothing story, a familiar story, a story that is so very, very old and yet so new. It is the old story.
You know, part of the process, and again, going all the way back to September, and just laying this thing out, kind of how it unfolded, and it started to become academic, and it became a little bit science and a little bit math and a little bit physics. And while it ended up being super exciting, Michael Klesch and I would talk a lot about, like, you know, we don't want to get, you know, all about the numbers. You know, we've got to get that heart. There's got to be the emotional juxtaposition to the intellect, and so finding that part of the Einstein on the Beach, the poem was beautiful. This is just a beautiful poem, but the music, as we were talking before, the music isn't what you know, what was best for what Michael wanted to do and what Matt could do with the horn line and what the percussion guys could do. So finding the combination of, as Michael said, the abyss, but then not throwing away the poem and trying to meld the two. I mean, I believe that piece, the ballad, started out with some Einstein on the Beach, right? And as it went, after the first kind of intro, that's when it handed off to the Abyss.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of time. I know Michael worked with Kevin, and there was just a lot of timing, you know, like when and how to say the last line, and how to build up in the emotional pitch of his delivery, you know, and you know, it ended up being, like I said, when I saw it in that stadium that night when we were heading to California, you know, it was just it was like chills. You know, it was so, Kevin had it going and Michael had it synced so well that it was, you know, it was like, this is the, you know, for all of the numbers and all of the intellect and all of the drive and the rest of the show, this concept of for love being infinite or eternal is so perfect right here.
Without you, I have no reason for being.
And it gave the guard some great choreographic opportunities. We ended up with a bench that we borrowed, I guess. I didn't know. But we had one prop and it was out, you know,
It's on
the number of times that I heard, you're going to have one little prop out on the 30. How is that going to work? You know, from the craziness of props of today, that nice little red bench from Gardner Webb was delightful.
Okay,
You know,
so hang on.
There's a story of the
or not.
No, there's a story of that bench. We ordered a couple different benches and they were getting back ordered. And I kept on sending them pictures saying, oh, and then we get the spring training. They're like, they're telling me now it's going to be 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And Michael Rosales was there and he came in for like that week there and said, that the second time or third time it was, and he said, I need a bench. And I said, well, there's 3 or 4 orange benches up there at Gardner Webb. And next thing I knew, they got one of them out, and this was in their big convocation center. And the next thing I know, it's outside and they're working on this thing. And I had to go take a ride down to the main office and say, you don't mind if we borrow your bench for a couple days? That's all it was going to be, for a couple days. And it ended up that it ended up being perfect. It ended up being almost like as Cesario calls it, the tomato stripe. It goes down the pants, and it fit so well, perfect. And I ended up having to go there, and I was like, I don't know if I can go ask him if we could take it on tour. And they were like, you got to. It was not until the very last day that I went there and had the nerve to go say, could we borrow this bench for the summer? And they said yes. And then when we came back, I had to get it spray painted. And then they even had a plaque made, and it sits in their convocation center, and it's underneath the bench that Carolina Crown used this. But that specific bench is due to Michael Rosales, because he saw it. We couldn't get the ones that we were looking for, and that's history's made at that time.
We were under that drum corps schedule, and it was like, it's ballad week, and I'm seeing these pictures of these benches. I'm like, I got to choreograph this ballad. And to me, like, that ballad was so important for it to be, done right. So I wanted a bunch of tries at it, and with these kids being as talented as they were, we needed to be able to kind of just tackle the story as early as possible so that we can get to the best possible, final version of it. But yeah, the bench was sitting there. I'm like, all right, grab that bench. We got to go.
And that bench had specific properties that was good for us. I mean, we were practicing with it. Everything was curved, had a curved back and a curved seat. And you wouldn't be able to do a lot of what we were workshopping on some of the benches that we were going to get. So that bench was coming with us, whether Gardner Webb said yes or no, honestly.
You talk about things, how this show fell into place. That's another example of how it fell into place. Which, that was another thing. I wish I could have the number of pictures of every staff person design and tech staff that through rehearsal or ensemble would find their way down to that bench and sit on it. And we do it in pairs. We'd end up one being there, somebody else will be there. I can remember the pictures. I wish I had a collage of those pictures in that bench of the number of people, staff people. Matt would be there, Liam would be there, Keith.
It turned into a running joke. Two lovers on a park bench was the running joke.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Michael Townsend, let's talk about those two lovers that danced the pas de deux at that park bench. Who were they, and what can you tell me about them?
That
was Sally.
Go ahead. Yes, Sally Ware and
Ethan.
Ethan. Yes.
Ethan Warren.
Ethan Warren.
Yeah, Ethan Warren. It was his. He was a rook out. That's why you probably struggled with the last name. He only marched that 1 year. He was really talented.
And we actually, I remember we auditioned a bunch of the Guard for those two roles, and I mean, there was so much talent. But for me, like, I had worked with Ethan a couple of years before, I think at Cadets, so I knew that he could handle it, and he was good with, like, as far as like lifting. I knew I could trust him. And obviously Sally's a 10. So.
Yeah, it was a good weight match too, with the size of the two of them. I think some of the other boys were not as cast well to dance with her and be as believable as Ethan was from a performance standpoint. It was a really good match. I mean, they really did wonders to make that thing come to life over the summer.
It was just the coolest thing to work on. You know, like I got out that score today to look at, and you know, it was fun to combine the Einstein on the Beach, you know, the poems all written in the score. There's things in there for Kevin, like you have to start at this measure, you have to end by this measure. It was fun to try to get, really to edit down the poem so that it delivered the message that the poem gave you without the entire length of the thing being there. That was fun. I remember working with Linda on the retard. We were talking about the retards. At the end of the big moment of the abyss, you know, I'd be up on the podium next to her. I was like, don't get to the release before I do. And we would conduct up there, and she'd always cut off the core before I would get to the cutoff. It's like, it's got to be longer. It's got to be longer. That was fun. And, you know, the ending, I know the first time I did it at home, like when I saw the final things of everything must have an ending except my love for you, I teared up then. I would tear up at every show. I would go down and stand by the park bench and watch Ethan and Sally dance and do that. And you know, I looked at it today. I got to the end of the score, I looked at it, and it made me like want to choke up. There was just something special about that one. Something really special.
If you're not ugly crying by the end of that thing, you've never been in love.
Yeah, it was the math at its most romantic state, you know, that poem, like, God, who wouldn't read that and want that in their love, you know, in their life, to feel like that.
Let's go to the closer. And it starts with the end of the poem, of course, with Kevin saying, impossible, you say? And then it's on. The piece is called Speed, and it definitely flew across the field. I think the thing that's most famous probably about your closer, because it became an internet meme, and I don't know, Leon May, what you call this thing, but I call it a flexing diamond. What do you call it, and were you surprised when it became viral?
Yeah, it was kind of fun. Yeah, it was the rotating pyramid or something along those lines, we called it. But, you know, the origin of that is that the year before, for the Common Good show, one of the iconic symbols we had in that was a cube. And I was at an Indiana Pacers game, and at a halftime, there was a huge guy spinning a big cube. And I sent that to Keith and Michael, and we ended up using that in the show. And Michael Townsend said, hey, you know, we should maybe try to, you know, squeeze one of those into the drill somewhere, like a rotating cube. So we ended up working that out for that year. So then, you know, early on towards the beginning of the move-in, I know that we had talked about, like, you know, this would be a good effect, and we can do it different. The piece of music, it was not Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, but the piece was called Dark Side of the Moon. But I think that kind of fit into what we were doing conceptually with the speed of light towards the end of the show, and the refraction of light from the the record jacket of Dark Side of the Moon. So, you know, we really thought that, you know, making that pyramid and then, you know, rotating it would be really effective, and it was.
It ended up too where through that rotation at the end of it, the guard was the light through it. They did an actual sequence through it. You know, like you said, we kind of jumped on the Dark Side of the Moon and the prism idea.
Now, if you look at it, there's one straight line of color guard going into it, and then 4 lines of color guard being refracted out of it.
I feel
No one probably noticed.
I hadn't caught that already. That is really, really cool. I'm wondering how many other people have missed that. A lot of wide open attacks, Matt Harloff, in this closing piece, with a big spread on the field too. Timing issues ever?
No, we were perfect from day one. No, the closer was, just a fun piece to work with. Tom mentioned it before, how the beginning of it was a compound piece. So in 12/8, so you know, the multiple tonguing that we had to, you know, and again, you know, and again, I'll say the same thing Tom said not too long ago. Just the talent of the kids, and then the fundamental program that works so well together. Not only the brass staff and how incredible, smart, and how much they care about, you know, making the kids as great as possible, you know, but how that works with the visual staff, you know, and then the talent of the kids that just, you know, again, through the process of training, you know, doing something like what we did in 2013, it takes time to develop that, you know, it takes time. You know, the color guard was so good. They were awesome. And, you know, the whole drum corps was so strong, and it just takes time to do that. And with the technique staff that we had and the talent that they had. And for me, cause I watched the show earlier today as well, I teared up, not by the end, but by the beginning of the ballad, when it's just it's an upper voice, it's an a cappella moment, and our upper trumpets had some range extensions, and they just slotted that, they nailed it. I was just like, holy smokes. It's just how hard that is, and how effortless the kids did it, you know, in getting back to the closer, how they made it look easy, but it wasn't. Why? Because of the fundamental program, the talent of the kids, and the instructional staff that were able to give them the tools necessary to pull off something that was impossible.
You know, some people, I would say it's impossible to visually portray infinity on a football field, or the infinite nature of love on the football field, or light refracting through a prism on a football field, but you guys managed to do that. And then somebody said, hey, how can we portray a black hole on the field?
We did like some kind of a time warp ending in the beginning of the year. Like the everybody kind of came down, and the guard like started to sprint off, and they became at different speeds and kind of fell. And, you know, it was just, we knew that wasn't where we were going to end. But I remember, and I'm pretty sure this was the day, we had a phone call. I think it was after the Nathan's hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July. Because I remember watching the contest and then getting on the phone call after. And we started having a discussion about bringing the emotion. And, you know, the thing that I thought that we still hadn't really explored in this physics exploration is time travel. And thinking like, how could we show time travel? You know, and it wasn't the biggest thing. I think there was a lot of things that supported that ending that created emotion, in, you know, aesthetically, and and just sound and drum corps. And again, as we were saying, like the audience seemed to want to help us bring that emotion at the end. But the time travel component was an idea that we had to kind of show the infinite love connection between our two lovers that were on the park bench, as if, you know, they would never have to suffer it not being able to be together by time. And we already had these big rolling bass drum things that we were using. And so we were like, let's make these fake giant bass drums. And then we just have to figure out a couple of different things that we could put in their hands. I think it involved a feather maybe from the hat. And we also tried to find body doubles, like the people that looked as close to what those two looked, so that when they went in and could come out, that you could, plausibly believe that there was a time travel component to the design. And of course there was, like I said, the choreography and the support of the drill and the sound, that was all part of it. But I remember not having a ton of time to make it work. Like the way when we had to get the materials to make that happen, the drums and the fabric, and when we would have choreographers in, I remember it being a pretty quick turn. It was like we were in the morning, we could work for about 4 hours on it, and then we were going to kind of test it out as the rest of the season unrolled. And I'm sure there were some adjustments. I do remember I think Jim had to end up with another trailer for those things. They kind of rode in the back like hockey pucks down the road for the last 2 weeks or whatever it was. That's my memory of kind of where the black hole time travel came from. It was after Nathan's hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July.
My memory of that was after quarterfinals. It was the first time my wife saw the show after that was in. And she was an English major and she was a big movie buff. So we'll go to a movie and when we leave, she'll tell me the 40 things that I didn't see in the movie that she picked up from it. But I saw her after the show and she just started yelling, time travel. You did time travel. It was the coolest thing. And she would just go on and on about it. I was like, that's awesome. Hit somebody exactly how it was supposed to hit them.
I mean, I'll say, as far as that thing goes, it was just not as easy as it looks. It was one of those things. It's like a magic trick. And, we sit here and talk about, we're all crying through all this stuff. And I watched the show recently, and I've been watching a lot of shows recently just because we're not doing anything. And it's been so emotional watching it. But at the time, I'm always crossing my fingers, praying everything's going to work. So I'm rarely enjoying the shows live. But those giant drums, like we had to sneak someone into one of them when it got rolled on the field for you to not see it. And how many times like that in itself didn't work, and someone comes toppling out of the fabric of the drum. I mean, if the crowd that sees what they see at DCI had seen what it took to get it to that point for this one moment to work and be believable, and not see that we switched guys, and only so much of their arm coming through and pulling someone out. It all had to line up at the right time, 30 yards apart on the other side of the field. And here we are at DCI week spending our time on this. We're putting in this magic trick at the end of our show. A good thing most of the ticks were out by then.
When did it go in?
It was very near the end, I believe. I don't know if we got it in for Atlanta. Might have been in for Atlanta.
No.
I don't think it was.
It didn't get in. We didn't use it until the last 3 days.
Yeah, I think it was right at the end. I remember Wesley frantically sewing the covers for these things.
Yeah. In Allentown is when I had just received the 2 bigger rings because we had to get a little bit bigger ones made than we had. How do we get them down the road now? I had to go out and buy a trailer.
That's when I remember riding with you with the trailer on the back of the RV with the 2 hockey pucks in it.
And this thing would go like bounce and we didn't get the coverings done until Allentown, and we stayed close to the stadium there at Robb Middle School, which was a dumpy old little school that I didn't know even how they fit them in the doorway to get these things figured out. So it had to be definitely the last week, and it was probably, I think we were still doing it at
I think we're at Franklin Field.
Welcome Stadium in Dayton. Franklin Field. That was on Allentown. We were there, but watching them try to figure that out, that was another one what a great idea. What a great idea.
Went back and looked at just the last few weeks of that season competitively. And you guys beat Blue Devils. The last time you'd beaten them going into the last few weeks of the season was the 30th of July in Salem. You were second in prelims, but then you won semis, and of course you won finals. You took general effect, visual, and brass. I don't know exactly what my competitive question here is, other than, Jim, you already said it was very early on. It was on the way to California when you were in Arkansas, when you thought you had a chance. I bet when you won semis, that did a lot for your confidence.
Yeah, well, the whole season did a lot for my confidence, and also for the members, to see that all develop. Because the biggest thing that we knew we wanted to do was, and we had been working on that since '07, being prepared for the beginning of the season, come out on fire. And 13 was no different than that. The first meeting, we met the Blue Devils, we did beat them. And then it was back and forth for, we'd win by a couple tenths, they'd win by a point. We'd win by a couple tenths, they'd win by a point. Then we finally won by a point, and then it was all panel stuff. It was them, different people's opinion. Again, what it came down to. And then they went on a little tear, and then we started fighting back, just because the panels were understanding more about what we were doing. I think the performance was always there from the members. I mean, it just developed at any given time through that. And certainly the last week, as I mentioned when I opened up, it was about the audience willing this drum corps on to win. I mean, we've seen it a couple times, because we were the first ones to break the ice on that one from like 20 years. Nobody came out of the top 6 to get up into there and do it. And unfortunately the Blue Coats did it after us. There was many times. I was not secure at all. I'm looking at the picture behind me. This is from 2013 finals night. Somebody just gave this to me about 6 weeks ago to hang in my office at home. And that's been my wife's favorite picture. It's just her and I, looking at the drum corps and waiting for the audience, and hoping that I didn't even know I didn't know what I was thinking. And the rest of the staff was behind me. And I remember going through the awards and looking back, and the brass would be going nuts, and these people be going nuts. And I'm just sitting there holding on, going, oh, we're with you, can we do this? And it did. And I have that memory that I see all the time, and I can't tell everyone here on this how the feelings you gave me over the years, and the feeling that you gave me for this year specific is one that I'll never ever forget. I cherish every moment of being with all of you.
I think us, like in the membership, we were just excited to see, like, how good can we make this? Like, how close to perfect can we try and do all these things that we're being asked to do? And I think even regardless of how those results would have turned out, I think everybody would have been able to have walked away feeling really proud of the product and the performance that we were able to present for others.
It just felt like you were a part of history. It felt like we were doing something that hadn't been done yet. And I think, and it's not even necessarily related to the competitive thing. I mean, people were wearing purple pants. Like, that was a big deal. It just, there was an electric feeling to it. And I'm so grateful for all the people I got to be around through it. Just some of the best people I've gotten to meet in my life from this drum corps.
There's no guarantee that we were going to be the last man called at the end, and that's definitely not the the only barometer or the only measure of doing the job. But I think for everybody that does drum corps, and I fall into this, especially about that year, is there was such a I don't think relief, but I guess a happiness of just one time, like going through the work that we all go through and having your name called last. It was a really unique feeling. And then to have it be with part of the family that we have built over, like everyone's saying, over 10 years, that moment, that night, of course, the whole season was magical, but kind of getting to the end for once, in that position, it doesn't change any of the experiences or any of what we had to do to get there, but it just felt a little nice to work as hard as everybody works, and then to have it go down that way, especially the way the audience was so supportive over the weekend. So great. And I see that picture behind Jim. I was like, I'm looking at that picture, and we were standing right there watching that same scene, and it brings back a lot of memories.
Hey, Dan, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to real quick point, just have one name that I'm not sure if we really mentioned, but what was really cool the next day at the banquet, I kind of want to piggyback what Keith was just saying. The next day at the banquet, I was sitting next to Michael, and it was all cool, looking at each other and all that. The people that had the biggest bright that they were a little more perked up than anybody else was Kevin Smith, Mo Smith, and those people that were there since the beginning of the Carolina Crown. We've been talking 10 years before, but those guys that were there from the very, very beginning, seeing them walk around with the pride that they had. I remember Michael and I talking about that, and just, of course we were all proud of each other and loving each other and all that, but then you see somebody like Kevin Smith go by, and it's like, he's part of something that Crown's the only drum corps to win 2 championships in 2 different classes. The only drum corps that can say they did that. And the pride that he had was something I will never forget. And I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't mean to, but just to kind of mention his name, in all of this, I just wanted to throw that out there. But thanks. Love you guys all. That was awesome.
No, I'm glad you did, and that's worth noting, the Division 2-3 championship and the World Class Championship. Thank you all so much. This has been, I hope you've enjoyed it, because I certainly have. This has been great. Good to see you. I miss you all. And thanks again.